Hello and thank you for joining us behind the bins. I'm Kate.
And I'm Tim, and we're aiming to lift the lid on the world of waste.
So each fortnight we'll present a different question to our guests and listeners and look to share some insights into the inner workings of the waste industry. Exciting times.
Yeah. The question for this time is, why do I have so many bins?
It's a good question.
Yeah, why do I have so many bins? How many bins do you have, Kate?
Oh gosh, well, I've got a second dry recycling bin because the first one wasn't really big enough. So I have 5 bins at my house.
So you're already Tommy Toppering me because you recycle more than I do. We're off to a great start.
I only actually use the larger of the brown bins, but I don't really know what to do with the other one now.
Okay, I have 4 bins like a normal Barnsley person.
So I guess, are you old enough to remember only having one bin?
I am old enough to remember that, but I don't remember it because I've really got a terrible memory. I don't really remember not having wheelie bins, although I do remember at my grandma's house there was one of the big round steel bins that we used to put the ashes in from the coal fire.
Uh-huh.
That's how old I am.
And everything went on the fire. That's how it still is in my dad's house, actually.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything just gets chucked on the fire. And
yeah, I mean, if you've got a coal fire burning all day, you want to keep the fire going, so putting more stuff on it is generally a good thing, depending on what it is. And also, there wasn't recycling or any of that sort of stuff. We just had rubbish that had to be got rid of. I think as we've got a bit more, enlightened, we now know that there is no such thing as away. It has to go somewhere, even if the somewhere is up the chimney. It's going somewhere, and we need to worry about what happens to it once we've finished with it.
I was looking earlier today and I was surprised how recent recycling was in the UK. So it looks like 2003.
Really?
Yeah.
So that means when I was at uni in the 90s, we didn't have wheeled bins.
Maybe wheeled bins, but not recycling, not separate recycling.
Right.
So, I think probably wheeled bins for refuse as a whole were earlier than that.
Yeah.
A separate recycling bin. Looks like it was sort of a recycling act of 2003, maybe. Yeah, which was interesting. But again, I can't really remember as a kid caring that much about how many bins we had.
See, I bought my first house in the early 90s, and I can't remember what bins we had. They were definitely on wheels, but I don't remember if we did recycling or not.
Oh, I wouldn't have thought so.
No, maybe not.
But it's so ingrained now, isn't it? We're all so used to recycling that it is actually a bit weird to think of a time before we had to separate our waste.
It's kind of the opposite of remembering when people used to smoke on planes.
So I guess, we know that lots of different local authorities historically have offered different options for recycling. That's been aligned a bit more recently with simpler recycling. Do we think that everybody has the same options now? In Barnsley, we still don't have food waste.
No, we don't all have the same options in terms of what bins we have and how we separate things. I think we are at a point now where pretty much all the same stuff is being collected and recycled by authorities in different ways. So, as you say, in Barnsley, there's no separate food waste collection, but that is because our food has been being recycled by different means, by separation, in the grey bin before. So, some places have got separated glass. Other people have their glass commingled with their tins, as we do in Barnsley. There's lots of different ways of doing it. And originally the legislation for simpler recycling was called consistent collections, I think. And I think everybody's very hung up on having exactly the same coloured bins and the same sort of methods of collection to make it simpler. I always thought, well, I only live in one place, so I don't really care what's happening in Croydon because I don't live there. If it's totally different, it doesn't matter. I think the simplicity comes from being able to package materials and tell the general public you can recycle cardboard or you can recycle a glass bottle. Exactly how isn't going to be the same everywhere, but at least now you can put the recycling symbol on a bit of packaging and know that it's probably true. I think one of the questions people have is, why isn't it all the same everywhere? And I think the answer to that is that we don't have the same facilities everywhere. It would be a bit bizarre in the extreme case to say people on the Outer Hebrides must recycle their waste in exactly the same way as someone in a London borough. If you're on a remote island, then you probably don't have a large MRF on your island. You have to ship it places. So in a rural location, you'll probably generate different types of waste to in a London borough. So I think that it is reasonable that it is different in different places depending on what recycling facilities exist in that area and what people are using and generating.
And I think it depends on exactly how those facilities work as well. So we see some places will combine garden and food, for example, but it really depends on what the onward journey of that waste is as to what makes sense to combine.
Yeah, and I think that also goes to why it's taken this long to get to this point, because if you're an authority, you've entered into a contract to build a materials recycling facility that is built around a certain mix of waste, and you suddenly take all the glass out, well, that changes how that recycling facility operates. It has to be reconfigured, rebuilt, whatever, and that costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time.
Will be interesting to see what our local authority guest today has to say about it. They've just changed from boxes for recycling to multiple wheeled bins. So thank you, Charlotte, for joining us on Behind the Bins as our first guest. The question that we were talking about today was, why do we have so many bins? And you guys came to mind because I know that you're just in the midst of making some changes. Do you want to just talk us through a little bit about what's happening with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, for the next couple of weeks, we are commingled in sacks, plastic sacks for our recycling, except we don't have glass or cartons or plastic film in there, which obviously became a requirement as part of simpler recycling. And we have our residual waste collected in 180 litre used by standard grey bins as well. And then we have garden waste, which is paid for, which was introduced the last couple of years. We are, from the 1st of June, moving to 3 weekly residual, retaining the 180 litre grey bins. And our recycling is going to be split out into 2 wheeled bins, a red bin for paper and card, and a blue bin that will collect all other recycling materials. We've had food waste in here since 2011 as well.
So my big question is, how many bins is that in total then for the typical Braintree resident?
So you've got your grey bin for your residual, red bin and blue bin for your recycling. You have a food caddy, which I don't class as a bin, it's a tiny little thing. And then optional is your garden waste bin. So if you have everything, you've got 4 bins and a caddy.
Did you consider, what were the different options you considered when you were thinking, right, we're going to go to 3 weekly, we're going to change the recycling? What were there other things you considered?
Yeah, absolutely. So we didn't start off thinking we wanted to go to 3 weekly. So when I came here, we knew we needed to get glass in because it was in plastic bags. So the easiest thing would have been to just put glass in the plastic bags in the Tetra Pak and just carry on as we were. But we've been sort of stagnating at around 44% recycling rate for a while. So we thought, actually, let's not just put more material into what we've got. Let's take a step back, look at what we want to do. So the national recycling target is 65% by 2035. That was also something that Essex as a whole had signed up to. And we just knew that if we carried on as the way we were, so we did some data that showed if you kept residual at exactly the same level that it was, we would have to double the amount of recycling that we collected. I think in the end, we modelled like 10 different options, different ways to do things. I remember having the team all together around. We brought in some of our comms colleagues, colleagues from customer contact and other areas, so all those areas that might be impacted by our decision, and also people that were residents, and said, what's this going to look like? What do we want to think about? What's good, what's bad? And really kind of worked it through and sort of scored it through that process. And we had like 3 pillars that we wanted to focus on. So the financial impact, our strategy, recycling and climate aspirations, and then ease of use. And everything at the beginning, we kind of used a matrix grid against those 3 pillars to make sure we made the right decision.
What is the reaction from residents? Has it been quite welcomed, or people don't always like change, do they?
I think whilst there were things that came up to begin with, we've definitely taken those into consideration. So a couple of key examples for that were concerns around space. So 2 new wheel bins, some properties can't have that. So we looked at different options. So we've got a standard collection, which means you get all of the bins, but there's a non-standard collection, and that's for people that have access issues. So they have boxes instead, but they still have the same capacity. So we've listened and we've put stuff in action. And actually the story, as we've told it since 2024 through to now, through our comms message, has really taken people along on that journey. So those absolute barriers to begin with have now sort of turned into self-modifying the conversations on social media around, actually, this is a really good thing. I'm really looking forward to this. But there are still people saying, this is going to be a problem for me. So we're working with them individually.
But it sounds like you've asked, rather than just saying, do you want to do it this way? You've actually asked them what would be the problem. So actually you get past the change resistance and into some specific things that you can tackle and mitigate.
We sat down a couple of times and I just said, right, what are people really going to struggle with? Like, let's absolutely rip this policy apart and say what's going to be difficult. And then we can then start to then work at, okay, how would you overcome that? What would we need to do? What would we need to do differently?
What do you think are going to be the next big changes? I know we haven't done these ones yet, but sort of once we get this bedded in, is there anything else that you see on the horizon for you guys?
Yeah, so one of the things, so because we have glass outside of collections at the moment, we have lots of bring bank sites across the district. So we know we need to look at those, but we promised we wouldn't just take them away straight away. So the consultation again gave us 12% of people who said, I'm still going to use the bring banks even when we collect glass from them. So we know we don't want to take that away immediately. But what I would really like to see is us reviewing the data to understand what that looks like, and then potentially taking some of the glass away where it's not needed and replacing it with things like waste electrical bring banks, looking at things like batteries, textiles, like what's the next set of materials we can collect. And then I think the biggest change coming for the majority of us is then local government reorganisation. And what does that mean? There's a couple of big policy changes that are coming that are going to be hugely impactful. DRS is going to mess the financial model of recycling collections, gate fees, so much, and that will have a direct consequence onto packaging EPR as well. So kind of seeing what that looks like, and then also the ETS as well in terms of the emissions trading scheme and what that does. So again, there's some things where we've made some decisions that I think is going to put us on a good stead for the future as well.
So just to finish on a prediction then, do you think under LGR, do you think the residents of Braintree will end up with more or fewer bins than they've got now? So the original question was around how many bins should we have?
So I think personally, and I'm going to be biased because I've definitely driven this, I think this is the perfect number. I think it does everything it needs to do. The biggest issue with commingled is what happens to the fibres. So the paper and cards, taking them out and protecting them was always our driving aim for this. So once you've protected those, the rest of the recycling all in together does exactly what it needs to do, and that infrastructure is there to be able to deal with that material. One of the other things we had was some waste composition analysis that showed us that even though we'd had food waste in for over a decade, there was 30% in the grey bins was food. So if nothing else, like one of our main aspirations of this is to make sure that food recycling goes up and comes out of the grey bin, goes to the AD and has those huge climate benefits. So I don't think we need any more, and I think any less will have an impact on the quality of that material.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Charlotte. We really appreciate you giving us your time, especially when it is a really, really busy time for you at the moment. It's been really interesting to hear what's going on over there.
Not a problem.
Maybe we'll come back in a few months or a year and find out how the recycling percentage is looking based on those changes.
Sounds good. I'm hoping it'll be really good.
So, Tim, why do we have so many bins?
Well, I think what we found out is that not everybody has a lot of bins, but some places have introduced more bins than others. And it really seems like that's to drive quality. If you separate the recycling more, particularly the fibres, the paper and the card, you get a better quality recycle at the end, which in turn is worth more money, which saves residents their council tax, is the theory. But I think on top of that, what we've also seen is that if you force residents to change, it's perhaps painful in the short term, but it does drive all of us to think a little bit more about what we're doing, and ultimately reduces the amount of stuff that's going into refuse, that isn't recovered, that is burnt or landfilled, and that's got to be a good thing. So more bins, bring them on.
Great stuff. Well, we'd love to hear from our listeners. So, let us know what you thought about the topic for today. Get in touch if there's anything else that you'd like us to talk about, or you've got any comments at all. You can find us both on LinkedIn, and we've also got a Behind the Bins community on LinkedIn, or you can email us at behindthebins@bartekmunicipal.com.
I love the way you said listeners, plural.
I'm an optimist, always. So have you got today's fun fact, Tim?
Wait, it's not a fun fact, it's more of a fun question.
Okay.
How many bins are there in England?
In England? Now then. I feel like I need to start with how many households there are in England, and I don't even know that I know the answer to that. I'm going to guess at 40 million bins.
Well, we can only guess, because as I say, no one's going to count them. When I inquired, the reasoning was that there is around 25 million households, which is a reasonable number. Most of those will have at least one bin, probably an average of 4. But then you've also got some that are obviously communal, so there'll be sharing bins. Then on top of that, you've got to put street and litter bins, and you've also got to put commercial bins. So the thinking seems to be 80 to 100 million bins.
Oh, are we including street bins and commercial bins?
A bin's a bin.
Bin's a bin.
But I mean, in summary, there's more bins than people.
Yeah.
How did we get to this? We're outnumbered by bins. What caught your eye this week?
I saw an article this week which was talking about simpler recycling, and it was in a local newspaper, and it was, these are all the things you can no longer put in your recycling bin.
Oh, yes, I've seen these.
Which I thought was quite interesting as a concept. You can no longer recycle this stuff. So I sort of had a click through. The number one item that you can no longer put in your recycling bin because of simpler recycling rules was irons.
Irons?
Who's recycling irons in their recycling bin?
You've never been able to put irons in your recycling bin.
And how many are people going through that's the number one problem that people have, Leeds, I think it might have been.
Yeah, I've seen a number of these articles, which seems to be trying to give the message that simpler recycling has restricted what you can recycle. And of course it hasn't. If anything, there are more things you can recycle now, not fewer. The things that I've seen that you can no longer put in your recycling bin, you've never been able to put in your recycling bin. So it does seem to be a particularly unhelpful way of trying to get people on board with simpler recycling. It's trying to do the exact opposite of that, isn't it? Exactly,
yeah. So yeah, that's the thing that caught my eye. Have you seen anything that's caught your eye this week?
Well, it was more of a cultural reference, really. I was in Germany for a few days, looking around a waste industry trade show. One of the things that struck me, I was looking around at the sort of technology for communicating with the residents, and it doesn't really seem to exist. And the feedback I got was that it's just not a thing, because culturally, if you tell the Europeans that as of next Tuesday, you need to put this thing in that bin, they just do it. And we seem to have a whole industry, which we're very delighted to profit from, but we have this whole industry of having to sort of cajole and persuade and educate our residents, and it just seems to be far less of a problem in Germany.
Interesting. So yeah, cultural differences.
We're now going to get lots of angry Germans emailing us saying that's not the case at all. I've just horribly stereotyped the entire nation, but there you go. What we do next time, Kate?
Next time we're going to talk about the dangers of working in the waste industry.
Oh, keeping it light.
Yeah, exactly. We're going straight in with the heavy stuff, I think.
Yeah, well, it is a dangerous industry, and yeah, if you tune in next time, we'll be able to explain to you why and what we can do about it.
Well, thank you for joining us behind the bins. I've been Kate.
So I must have been Tim.
Thank you very much.